insight into what Americans think is the real cause of income inequality. According to a brand new Fox poll, 60% of Americans say the government's policies actually create the income gap in the first place. Another Fox News poll finds a majority of Americans also think that the government is not the answer, saying that proposed policies to spread the wealth are not a good idea. Speaking in Chicago this week, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie told the audience that Washington needs to embrace more policies that allow Americans to make it on their own.
I don't think the American people want income equality. What they want is income opportunity. See, if I go to somebody right now and I say to them, I can guarantee you X dollars a year for the rest of your life, there may be some in America who would accept that. But I think most people in America would go, how do I get a little more than that? That's the spirit of this country. How do I get a little more? I think that the problem we have is an opportunity gap, not an income equality gap.
Dan Henniger is deputy editorial page editor of the Wall Street Journal, and this is the topic of your column for this week, Dan. It was really interesting to read a little bit about where this income inequality debate first started. I want to get to that in a moment, but first you say income inequality is a political loser when it comes to an issue. Why is that?
Well, I agree with Chris Christie. I think that although the Democratic left would like to push it, and in fact, the current mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, got elected with a theme of a tale of two cities. It perhaps works in these kind of liberal enclaves like New York City or perhaps Massachusetts, where Senator Elizabeth Warren got elected. But I think out there in the broad country in the United States, it remains a political loser, pretty much for the reasons Chris Christie suggested, is that most people do not resent those who have made money because they understand that those who have made money are the ones running the companies, creating the companies that produce jobs that they themselves and their families are going to work for.
So you're saying it's more of an aspirational quality that Americans have to want to achieve the success that in some political circles, some suggest that they might resent.
The idea of income inequality and resentment of the upper classes is in many ways, Jenna, a European idea where you had aristocracies. And you say that in your article, that it really goes back to 1912 Europe. Tell us, if you can, the cliff notes of that. Well, look, in his speech on this in early December, Barack Obama said, quote, statistics show, that's his word, statistics show that income disparities in the United States are not much better than ththose in Jamaica. You're taken aback and go, what are you talking about? Statistics say the United States is no better than Jamaica. Well, there is this statistical device called the Gini coefficient, created by an Italian statistician named Corrado Gini in 1912. And ever since, economists have used the Gini coefficient, the World Bank uses it, to measure every country's role in income disparity. But the question remains, what does that have to do with real life for people in the United States who, as Governor Christie suggested, are trying to aspire upward?
You say that you like what Governor Christie was talking about. I have a little bit more sound from his talk earlier this week. Let's go ahead and play that. Oh, I think we're going to have an issue with that sound. Okay. You know, actually, we'll just save it. You know, it's okay. We're going to save it. The control room tells me to have it. Let's just save it because we heard a little bit about what he had to say. My question for you is that the administration has effectively changed the conversation to this one about income inequality. Should Republicans take that on nose to nose, or should they suggest a different topic is the number one issue for Americans today?
Well, I think the number one issue for Americans today, and yes, I agree, I think Republicans should take it on head on. And some of the numbers in the Fox poll that you were showing earlier suggest to me why the Republicans should do that, which is what has happened the last 5 years under the Obama presidency. The United States, since World War II onward, has had an annual growth rate of over 3%. It has been below 2% during the Obama presidency. Now, that may seem like an economic statistic as well. But when the growth rate falls, jobs are not created. There is not enough economic activity in the U.S. And this is the sort of thing that I think Republicans have got to talk about. How can we get the jobs machine started again?
But the president has said time and time again, this is based on an economy that he inherited, not one that he's created. And so far, it seems that the Republicans haven't created a narrative that really contradicts that or combats that in any way successfully so far. Why not?
Well, there is no real spokesman in the Republican Party. When you say the Republicans, there is no one individual, the way the president himself is the spokesman for his party. But they do have an opportunity, I think, with the sort of nightmarish experience that Obamacare is having. The Obama health care law is a huge law, and we're now discovering it didn't affect just the uninsured. It affects a lot of businesses in this country who are trying to figure out whether they have to comply for it. The administration just announced this week that they're going to take them off the hook. But I think the dynamics of that law and the way it is causing employers to spend their time trying to figure out whether they are in compliance or whether they can hide from it, rather than running their businesses, growing their businesses, and thinking about whether they can hire more workers, is exactly the problem at the center of what we've been going through the last 5 years.
Just real quick, in your article, you also mentioned, besides Obamacare, education, because there still is this issue of the very poor in this country in the urban areas that, in so many cases, seem to cause the ripple effects of news throughout the country, right? The stories of New York or stories of Detroit. Yeah. What is your point on education that you think needs to be brought up?
If the issue is income inequality and disparity, the one thing virtually everyone agrees on across the board is a good education, a successful education, translates into higher earnings over one's lifetime. In the inner cities of the United States, people are getting failed public educations by and large. And as long as that persists, and as long as the unions refuse to reform the systems in places like New York and Chicago and Los Angeles, income disparities among the inner city poor are going to persist because the young people there simply will graduate without being educated to work in the kind of economy that we live in today. I think that is the litmus test for seriousness about income disparity, reforming the inner city school systems.
Very interesting. Dan, always great to have you.
Good to talk to you, Jenna.
Appreciate it. Thank you.